swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone. Yes! It is bedlam at the bank. One of the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way back to make it. His paper slammed up. And the doctor made a sensational play. Through in front. The bucket. They score! After Rose Cutter. Boston fires. Boston goal! 35 to Cannon. He's definitely dead. And goes forward. Finally fumbles the football and the Eagles have it.
We welcome you to the Phillies Sports Hour here on April 20th, 2024. We missed last week. Sorry about that. We're back this week, and we have a lot to talk about. The Sixers get their first round series against the Knicks started up tonight, actually. I was hoping it was an afternoon game, but 6 o'clock tip at the Garden. A lot going on with the Eagles as well as the draft is approaching and the Phils are rolling into it. We're going to stay positive today and stay away from the Flyers. Very sad end, 8-game losing streak. However, we're going to stay positive and talk about the Sixers, Eagles, and Phillies. And I'll have my guests on for a second. But just before that, very exciting announcement went up on Phillies Sports Reports Friday afternoon that we are running it back with the second Philly Sports Reports game at Citizens Bank Park on June 1st, Saturday at 7:15. First pitch, Phils take on the Cardinals. Pre-game meetup in the parking lot. We're to be determined the location and time that will be occurring. Seats are up in 301 and 302 with the Fandemic crew, where it's always fun up in 301, and people like the Valley Towels last year, so we're going to bring those back. $50 a ticket. Venmo at Jennifer G71 for tickets. So we'll be pushing that for the next month and a half or so. So it's never too late to get your tickets. But joining me now is Sean Barnard from Fox the Gambler and a lot of other stuff he's got going on to talk about Sixers, Phils, and Birds today. Sean, how are we?
Doing well, man. I appreciate you having me on. And this is the busy time, the exciting time of year, my personal favorite ahead of what I hope to be a deep playoff run for this Sixers team. So in my eyes, the vibes are high right now. A lot going around in the sports world, and I'm ready to dive into it all.
There's certainly a lot going on. NHL playoffs starting up as well. NBA, lots going on. But let's start with the Sixers, who beat the Miami Heat on Wednesday to go to the first round. A little bit of a scary one on Wednesday, not the start we were looking for. I actually messaged you saying we might need to change the date of our pre-recording for this, and you gave me some hope, saying this game ain't over yet. I didn't hear no bell, a little bit of Rocky, and, well, they ended up pulling it out. But we can't just skip away from that first half. We're not going to be like how we were with the Eagles and pretend that the first half didn't matter. The first half matters with the Sixers, and in the playoffs, they were outscored 51-39 the first half. They could do nothing against the zone on offense, and they had 11 turnovers. What did you see from that first half? And, of course, they turned it around, but definitely still something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start by saying I still take that the victory is a positive. That, to me, I think they played what might have genuinely been their worst half of basketball all season in the first half of that game and still found a way to gut out and win that game, which I will take as a positive. And also a quick hat tip to the Miami Heat that they're a genuinely really solid team. And obviously the Jimmy Butler injury kind of changes their playoff outlook and hopes from here. But the way the bracket shook out, that I truly think the Heat and the Sixers were each top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. And it is unfortunate that had to be a play-in matchup. And of course, kind of the Heat hopes have died down quite a bit after the Jimmy Butler news. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But as far as the Sixers specifically, it definitely was a frustrating half. The zone absolutely got to them. It was a unique zone that Miami was throwing, essentially kind of a box and one on Joel Embiid with the constantly just baiting that entry pass and really just picking it off, doing damage to the other end. I was really frustrated by just the decision-making process. And from the Sixers specifically, felt like they were so bought in on forcing it to Joel rather than just playing natural basketball. Like if the Heat were that zeroed in on taking it away, just let them at that point and go attack in other ways would have been my preference there. But the bottom line is they did clean things up in the second half. Shout out to Nico Batum for truly changing the game, and his activity, his movement, his finding little niches and spaces in that zone in the second half really just opened everything up, and they poured it on from there. So it was a scrappy, hard-fought win, but the bottom line is it is survive and advance.
It is survive and advance at this point. And let's talk about that second half a little bit. 66-53, your score in the second half in favor of the Sixers. Got to shout out Chick-fil-A, of course, 56-45 run after we won the free chicken. They might have saved the season. You mentioned Nick Batum, 20 points, 6 for 10 from 3, 5 boards, and a game-winning block. And Embiid came through, 12 points in the first 3 quarters, 11 in the fourth. How did this team turn it around? Obviously, it's the free chicken, but on the court.
Yeah, the chicken was absolutely the spark there, and a cool moment. That'll be a legendary little chapter in the 30 for 30 for turning around the season right there. But as far as the on-court stuff, I do think Batum was the difference maker, that he just kind of took it personally, that it's like, okay, they're forcing anyone else to beat it. I'll be that guy, shooting 6 for 10 from 3, showing that willingness. He's been really solid for this team all season, and I do think he's going to continue to be down the stretch. Thought defensively, he was just as impressive. Spent some time guarding Butler, spent some time on Tyler Hero. Of course, that game-winning block on Hero, which was a massive moment. And he gave a little hat tip to the coaches following the game, saying that they showed him that exact play on the sideline leading up to him, thinking that's what Miami would do. And that's a large reason for my optimism for this Sixers team is Nick Nurse and the coaching staff as a whole. They truly do have this championship pedigree, that they're one step ahead, will have the champion or the coaching advantage on a night-to-night basis. And then down the stretch, I still think it should be talked about louder. It was Joel Embiid taking over. That three-pointer, that and one was absolutely massive, where he won that offensive rebound by himself. And then that pass to Kelly Oubre at the end, that to me was like a huge moment in individual growth for Joel. That some of his playoff shortcomings in years past, it's been him taking him versus the world mentality and forcing shots when he probably shouldn't, taking on double and triple teams. His willingness to make the pass, the ability for Kelly Oubre to be in the right spot, be open, and then ultimately the execution to lead to that and one. I think that's a huge moment of growth for Joel and something that speaks volumes for their playoff hopes.
That's something you see with Joel, the difference when he's on the court and not. And it's just massive. And to him to be on the court for as much time as he can be on, they're big minutes for the Sixers. And he played 38 minutes on Wednesday night, which is the most since his return. And he did not look good through the first 3. He was able to come back and, I guess, dominate down the stretch, which was what ultimately led to the victory. Is Embiid healthy enough to lead this team on a run? And against the Knicks, is there any hinge on him? Any sort of like time to pull him, maybe let it look at him a little differently? But how does he look going into a tough stretch they got coming up here against New York and whatever comes next?
Yeah, it's obviously frustrating and disappointing that he is not the full version of himself. And you got to feel for the guy on a human being standpoint, too, that he truly was in the midst of a historic season this year prior to the injury. And I do think that he would have kept pace for that. Obviously, you wish he was in ideal shape and ideal fitness level. That's just not the case. I do think the biggest reason for optimism in my mind, I don't think it's a health thing. I think physically he's healthy enough that this is much more about him working himself back into shape, finding that basketball flow, finding his really just routine and just kind of finding his stride as a player and really just trusting that knee. That in the first half of that Heat game, there were several just little lanes around the basket that he missed, little bunnies around the rim. And if that's a healthy Joel Embiid, like he's just dunking that basketball. He's just rising up and just putting it down in the way that he typically does. So I think it's going to improve as the playoffs go on. And to both Embiid and Nick Nurse's credit, they have made changes to his substitution pattern that a typical like day in the game of Joel Embiid is he plays the entirety of the first quarter, sits the first couple of the second, plays just about the entirety of the third, either all 12 minutes or comes out with like 2 minutes left on the clock, and then plays that final 8-minute stretch. They've done way more of coming out for just a minute here, 90 seconds here, 2 minutes here, and kind of balanced it that way. So it's going to be interesting to see how much that changes in the series. But I do think that throughout this playoffs, he's going to get better more than he'll get worse, which I do think is a positive.
All steam ahead in New York. And something that's not so steam ahead, especially with Sixers fans, is our favorite Tobias Harris. He only played 33 minutes because he was tired. And it seemed like the Sixers played their best basketball without Tobias on the floor. Any opinion on this? Does this mean anything?
I absolutely think it means something. And Nick Nurse spoke at the most recent practice saying that like they have 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 guys that they potentially trust in a closing lineup, and it's going to be situational. And that's absolutely the right outlook. That Tobias, we all know the highs and lows of Tobias Harris, and it feels like he's been here for decades at this point. And it's unfortunate that he's really playing his worst basketball during this season overall. That I truly think there were stretches of this year that were the true valley of how we've seen him play. I feel bad for the guy because I do think that he gets a worse rap than he deserves. Most of the criticism, of course, coming from that contract and him really being asked to fill shoes that he's just simply not capable of. But the bottom line is every decision has to be made about what's best for the Sixers team. And my pushback to Tobias is always there's no individual skill set that he possesses that maximizes this team. That the choices should be made. It's Tyrese Maxey and it's Joel Embiid, and then it should be the three players that complement them best. And if you want extra rebounding, there's guys that are better than Tobias. If you want extra shooting, there's guys that are better than Tobias. Ball handling, defending, there's all guys that have individual characteristics that I do think maximize both Embiid and Tyrese Maxey more. So I think, unfortunately, that's just kind of way the cookie crumbles here.
Yeah, it's tough. You mentioned cookie crumble. Would you trade Tobias Harris for a crumble cookie?
These days, I wouldn't go that far. I do, again, think he gets a worse rep than he deserves, but it is funny how much that has carried over. And shout out to Toby for, I guess, maximizing on that a little bit, as he's obviously got some ownership stake there.
Yeah, hopefully when the Sixers, hopefully if they can win it, maybe part of the parade is we all get crumble cookies. I think that he starts throwing them off the off the bus that they're on. But Tobias, I mean, it's tough. You saw the rebound glitch that happened the other night where he was just kept going up and just couldn't make it. I watched it again today and I wanted to shoot my eyes out. But he is expected to leave after the season. Came out today, Keith Pompey of the Inquirer. Apparently the Pistons have interest again. They did during the deadline and nothing was done. Is that going to happen? This is the last year on this contract. Does it change if they go deep? If they go to these conference finals, does Tobias maybe return, or is it set in stone? This is the last dance for Tobias in the red, white, and blue in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think the writing's been on the wall for this one for a little while, and frankly, I'm kind of surprised that he's played out the entirety of his contract here. That I think each year there was a legitimate chance and argument that he would be traded, and it's interesting the Pompey stuff. That for Tobias Harris, first off, his agent is his dad, and his dad absolutely struck when the iron was hot, getting him this deal. Of course, them being a little bit handcuffed by Jimmy Butler wanting no part of playing for the Sixers and all the behind-the-scenes situation there. So they had to sign somebody after trading all their assets and young players, and Tobias was the beneficiary of that. It's very clear that there's a direct line of command between Tobias Harris's dad / agent and Keith Pompey for a lot of these reports. It's been that way for a couple years now. And also there was a little burner situation that you can check out. Crossing Broad, I know read a nice article on that, but just going to bat for Tobias after that game. The bottom line is I do think he feels underappreciated, and it's fair to feel that way. Like, to his credit, he has been one of these steadier, available, and still a guy averaging really solid numbers, but I do think they are numbers without substance, and I think ultimately that it's best for both sides for him to find greener pastures, go elsewhere, and get a sizable contract on a team with not quite the championship aspirations the Sixers have.
Yeah, Detroit aspirations not up there for a championship. Hopefully you can help in what Detroit's trying to do, and really, who knows what they're trying to do. Speaking of guys that have come through this organization that haven't been welcomed by the fans, is Doc Rivers, who is now in Milwaukee trying to get through Indiana in their first round series without Giannis. Good luck to him. Do the Sixers win this game on Wednesday with Doc as the coach? And just how massive has this new coaching staff been? You mentioned it earlier, how they pinpointed out the exact play they were going to run when Batum got that big block. Does that happen? The bottom line, does this team win with Doc Rivers on Wednesday?
Yeah, to put it simply, no, they do not. That I do think Nick Nurse is the biggest difference maker for this Sixers team. It's the first time in the Joel Embiid era that every single night there's a tactical advantage in the Sixers' favor from a coaching standpoint. It's the little things, just like benching Tobias in crunch time. That's a move that Doc Rivers, I don't think, would have been able to do. And there are the adjustments on the fly, the feel for the game, the giving Kyle Lowry extended minutes here, or switching the matchups between Batum and Kelly Oubre. All these kind of just little decisions throughout the game, I give Nurse a ton of credit for. And he's definitely unlocked Joel Embiid in a further way this year. His growth as a playmaker, I give a ton of credit to Nick Nurse, that I think a lot of it has been less about Joel Embiid becoming a better passer and more about there being more available passing options for him to capitalize on. The backdoor cuts to Kelly Oubre, the pin downs that are being run for guys like Buddy Hield. There's just more complexities to this offense and defensively. Every single stoppage, they're changing some sort of defensive formation. And I've never even seen that from a team before, whether it is just switching into drop coverage, dropping to a zone, a 2-3, a 3-2, box and one. They throw some really advanced stuff throughout the flow of the game that's really impressive and keeps opponents on their toes. So I love Nick Nurse. I've been very impressed with what he's brought. And overall, this team would not have nearly the hopes that they would if Doc Rivers was still here.
maybe if Joel was playing throughout the year, they would still be in a playing spot with Doc Rivers. I don't want to throw that out there, but there could be a possibility. And I saw a thing 2 years ago. Embiid was, not the biggest fan of Nurse, saying he was needing to stop, whating about calls and plays and whatever was going on. And now Nick Nurse has been the biggest difference maker for the Sixers team, and I don't think the Sixers have ever had any kind of huge flip like this from a coach ever.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And I truly believe that Nick Nurse is a top 3 coach in the NBA. And I just stand on that. It's interesting the back and forth between Nick Nurse and Joel Embiid. That was one of the better just player and coaches feuds that went on for several years. And it's for all the same reasons that we now like and appreciate Nick Nurse, that he threw some really advanced stuff at Joel Embiid, forced him to make decisions that he was not comfortable with, and took the ball out of his hands in a way that was very frustrating. There were quite a few wars between this Raptors and Sixers team dating back to a lesser version of Joel Embiid. And obviously the heartbreaker that we all think about is that Kawhi Leonard shot, but there's plenty more to it as far as little matchups and even regular season kind of spats that occurred. So it's cool that were able to turn a new leaf. I think it was always one of those battles that they respected each other, but they were clearly fighting on the other sides. So it is cool that it's now kind of come together in Philadelphia.
It certainly has come together. And what's come together, Sixers Knicks for the first time since 1987. They're matching up in the postseason, right. And that was a fun one back in '87. The Inquirer, I forget who wrote it, but the Inquirer had something cool on it, how much feud there was, and there might be something coming back with that. We'll get that back. We'll get to that with B-Ball Paul and Josh Hart in just a little bit, which is so absurd. But the Sixers open as slight favorites against the Knicks, -110. I'm going to bring out a little bit of your inner Fox gambler. That should the Sixers be favorites?
I do believe so. And I'm kind of surprised for it to be the case, to be perfectly honest. But if I'm just going to look at this just objectively, the Sixers are the better team. And the question mark is with Joel Embiid's health. This Knicks team is very good. I respect this Knicks team, that this isn't a series that I think they're going to walk through. If this was the Doc Rivers Milwaukee Bucks, which was the matchup I was praying for things to shake out with, I'd be slamming my fist on the table saying Sixers in 5, maybe even Sixers in 4. That's not going to be the way this series goes, that it is going to be a bloodbath. But I do think that this Sixers team, they just have more diverse ways in which they can win. Jalen Brunson, he's unbelievable. He's had an incredible year, but he's really their only creator on offense. They have guys like Dante DiVincenzo, guys like Miles McBride, guys like Josh Hart that can hit shots, knock down when it's created for them. But as far as getting into the flow of offense and creating for the team as a whole, it's really just Brunson. So I expect Nick Nurse to be really forcing the ball out of his hands. And also, this Knicks team, they're defensive minded, they're hard nosed, but on the offensive end, every basket looks so tough for them. And Brunson's kind of the leader of the pack there, that he's getting to his post spots. He's using all his twists, turns, and moves. And again, I love the guy. He's terrific. One of my favorite players to watch. But I do think that there's little doubt about the top end talent of the Sixers team. And another kind of phrase I've been throwing out is Joel Embiid, even at 80%, is still going to be the best player on this floor, even with Jalen Brunson. And then that gap between Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Maxey is that number 2 is significantly smaller than the gap between Tyrese Maxey and whoever you want to argue is the Knicks number 2, probably OG Anunoby there. But I just think there's way more top end talent on the Sixers team. And I do think that ultimately they're the better team overall.
All right, we're going to touch more on little bit insides in just a second, but going back to Wednesday, a lot of talk how the Sixers kind of limped themselves out of that one, barely beating Miami. Now they're kind of crawling themselves into this New York Knicks series starting today at 6:00 at the Garden. Do you agree with that the Sixers are limping into the series and crawling their way through Miami and now are going to be shell-shocked by New York?
I wouldn't use that terminology personally. That I think it hasn't been the cleanest basketball, and they're certainly not playing their peak, which we've seen for a couple of stretches of the season, specifically before the Joel Embiid injury. They're getting better. They're figuring things out. And you also got to consider guys like Kyle Lowry and Buddy Hield, who were both midseason acquisitions, they had not played with Joel Embiid until he returned from his injury. So these are still key players figuring out how to play with each other, finding their full stride. So I definitely think there's more top end potential and they're not playing at their peak. But the bottom line to me is this is survive and advance. And I still give a ton of credit to the Heat that is a good basketball team, a hard nosed team. So it's a good win overall in my mind.
The X factor in the series is going to be huge on either side. For the Sixers, who do you think will be the difference maker if they want to move on and maybe play Doc Rivers?
There's a couple directions I could go here. I think I'm going to roll with Kyle Lowry as the X factor here. And the reason I say that is, number one, I just fully expect him to be getting under Jalen Brunson's skin to the fullest extent. That I think that's very much going to be a play in Nick Nurse's book where, he has that similar short squat, just ability to get in a guy's face, be all over him in a way that very few can. He obviously has the championship pedigree, the ring on his finger that we know so well. And he is a guy that still has stuff left in the tank. But that was my greatest concern when he came to the Sixers is this guy just washed up? He's 38 years old, but that is not the case. He has been an improvement over Patrick Beverley, which there was plenty of noise back then. And me personally, I didn't love moving on from Pat Bev, but I do think that he unlocks something offensively by allowing Maxey to play off ball. And defensively, I think he's going to be all over Brunson as a part of the defensive scheme. So I'll throw Kyle Lowry as the X factor here.
That's a big reason I love the Kyle Lowry acquisition. Yes, he's extremely old and probably shouldn't be playing really great basketball anymore. However, his scrappiness, and he was all over the place against Miami, and that's playoff Lowry. That's his inner North Philly coming out. And now he's playing for his hometown team at almost 40, trying to get this team back to the Eastern Conference from when he was a kid.
Yeah.
He's gonna be a difference, and people need to open their eyes up to it.
Absolutely. And there's all these noise about the Nova Knicks and all the guys that are representing Villanova there. Well, we got one of ours ourselves right here with the Sixers, and Kyle Lowry absolutely still means business. And I've been very impressed with the level that he still competes at. So there will be a couple moments throughout the series where he absolutely turns the tide of the game just with his intensity, his scrappiness, and still his basketball ability. So Kyle Lowry, I do think will play a major role. And also to your point, he's become incredibly more valuable to this team because of the DeAnthony Melton injury. That I think both the Sixers and Lowry are a little bit surprised by how significant and important he's become to this team. A lot of that because of injury, but I do think he can step up and deliver.
Yeah, Melton officially out for game one. We'll see if he wins / if he will return. And you mentioned Villanova, and this question's resurfacing itself as it does nearly every March, except the last two because Nova hasn't been in. Is Villanova a Philly school, Sean?
I still consider it a Philly school. I do.
Okay.
I get the pushback, but I think you embrace it with the highs and the lows here. And also over on Fox Sports The Gambler, we are a streaming partner of Villanova. So I personally have produced a couple of their games there. So I'll own it as a Philly school. Absolutely.
All right. So he's a little biased. So we're going to pretend like that take with me. I mean, they did parade through Philadelphia. So if you're parading in Philadelphia, you're a Philadelphia school. That's how I look at it. I'm also looking at how little zone the Knicks play. They have Tom Thibodeau. It's a great name. In his 4 seasons with New York, has ran zone defense 69 times in 4 seasons. That's a very low and nice number through those 4 seasons. 10 of those in this season. So he's only ran it 10 times compared to Miami, who ran it 987 times this season. You saw the Sixers struggle against the zone against Miami, and I think we've seen it every year since 2018 was their first run.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to help.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, zone defense, kind of a dying breed in the NBA. Made a little bit of a comeback, but Miami absolutely runs it more than any other team in the league. And I do think the Knicks will throw a little more at it at the Sixers team based on how it looked, but I don't expect the same success. That zone defense is very skill set based defense that you have to have the Jimmy Butler type of guys, the Haywood Highsmith type of guys, the Caleb Martin type of guys that are big, switchable, athletic, and very heady defenders. And this Knicks team is obviously filled with high IQ basketball players as well, but I just don't see the same dangers of Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson and all these Dante DiVincenzo being the guys digging down and switching off. I do expect a lot of the OG Anunoby and Joel Embiid matchup, which I think will be interesting. But overall, I think this is going to be more traditional basketball matchup, which will be refreshing to the Sixers team.
Yeah, it's certainly going to help them out in what will be a tough series, and they're going to need a really good way to beat the Knicks. The Knicks usually look down on in the NBA, but they are looking really good this season. The New York Times had a really weird cover today where it was Embiid looking down on the Knicks and they were framing the Knicks as the underdogs, which didn't really make any sense because they are the 2 seed facing the 7 seed. But I mean, because if you look at the line, the Knicks are an underdog. So whatever, we'll let the New York Times run with their cartoons. But what is the best way for the Sixers team to beat the Knicks in a 7-game series?
Yeah, it's get the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands, that don't let him be the guy that beat you, that he's truly the only guy on this Knicks team that strikes fear into my heart. And again, I love the dude. I think he's terrific. He's an all-NBA first-team player this season, in my opinion. So I'm not going to talk anything bad on him, but I do fully expect Nurse to be fully focused on not allowing that to be the guy that takes them down. And I just don't believe in their supporting cast to be able to step up enough. So I think that's going to be the biggest adjustment, and it's going to be on the defensive end. I think there's going to be some old school 80s and 90s basketball where we're looking at some like 87 to 89 type victories as a final score here. And I do think like on the offensive end, it's Joel Embiid being Joel Embiid, that it's him getting to his spots, him finding his comfortability on the floor, him trusting his knee in a way that we haven't quite seen yet. And it's still Tyrese Maxey stepping up to center stage. So I want to see a lot of two-man action between those two specifically, but I do think this game will be won on the defensive end by the Sixers.
It'll definitely have to be won at Madison Square Garden, where Embiid does a lot of stuff, and that's the big stage, especially at the Garden. Embiid's had a pretty good career with the Sixers at the Garden, so it should be fun. Another way you usually would like to beat a team in a playoff is by grabbing bulletin board material. And B-Ball Paul, playoff Paul, may have just provided some quote-unquote bullet board material to the Knicks. Here's what he said. What was this? Was this Thursday or Friday? Was this today?
The day before, so Thursday it was.
All right, so this was Thursday. B-Ball Paul. It's so funny.
Paul, you guys now will face the Knicks in the first round. Was there multiple conversations how we want to get this win to match up with the Knicks? Are you confident in that Knicks? And was it more that, or was it more to avoid the Boston Celtics in the first round to make this game so important last night?
No, man. I mean, I feel like we ain't ducking no smoke, but yeah, we wanted the Knicks matchup. Of course, that's the easier team, I guess. But, it's going to be fun. We match up pretty well with them. They got a great guard. We got a great guard. We also got Joel, MVP. So, like you said earlier, he's one of the most unstoppable guys in the league right now. So they're going to have to send triple teams, and he's going to get everybody else involved, I'm sure of it.
First of all, B-Ball Paul's microphone is absolutely horrible. So I don't know who's in charge of the Sixers microphone department, but someone get him a better mic. Secondly, I feel like this is more of a praise of the Celtics than a bash at the Knicks, but the Knicks are taking it personally. Apparently, Josh Hart today said that he doesn't effing care, or he doesn't give a what. So, I mean, whatever. Is this going to swing the Knicks anyway, or is this just stupid stuff that no one should care about?
Yeah, I don't think I think it's mostly a nonsense story. Media savvy, I would say, by any means, and he's gotten in trouble with that before. I know there was the situation earlier this year where he basically called Anthony Davis a flopper ahead of things, and it wasn't something that he meant to kind of give him that or frame it that way, but it just kind of sometimes his mouth speaks or works a little quicker than his brain there, and I think that was exactly the case here. He even kind of caught himself after where he's like, I guess, and so, I mean, it's just B-Ball Paul being B-Ball Paul. The bottom line is I'm sure the Knicks will try and use that as bulletin board information. But also, if you line up 100 players out of 100, give them some true serum or hook them up to a lie detector and say, would you rather play the Knicks or the Celtics? That all 100 teams or all 100 players are picking the Knicks there. So it is some brutal honesty. I do wish he would have handled it a little bit different. But overall, like, if that's what it takes to get you going in a playoff series, then there's an issue there in itself.
Yeah, B-Ball Paul needs some PR practice. But it is what I mean. I feel like the city is too much trauma with bulletin board material after Garrett Stubbs said he's going to jump in the pool in Arizona, and the Diamondbacks used it and fueled it. So I mean, if this really makes a problem, it's not going to matter. And also, this media network getting B-Ball Paul over anyone else just shows you how much of a media department they are. So whatever. That's all I have for this series. Now it's time to the predictions. Who's going to win this series? How many games? How will the Sixers fare? Give it to me, Sean. Be brutally honest with me.
Yeah, and I not just kind of gassing them up here. I truly believe this. It's Sixers and 6 in this series. That this is going to be a bloodbath. This is going to be a battle. Every game is going to be competitive. I don't really think either team will have a blowout victory in either direction in this one. I think every game is going to be just a straight up 80s boxing match style of game. But I do think ultimately that there is more talent on the Sixers team. I think Nick Nurse has the coaching advantage. Jalen Brunson's the only guy that is stone cold striking fear into my heart. And I think Nick Nurse is going to find ways to allow that not to be the guy driving the damage. So I think the Sixers find a way to win. I think they look better as the series goes on, and ultimately they clean it up in 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, Sixers and 6. How long have we been rocking with that? I even have it in my Twitter bio, Sixers and 6. I'm agreeing with you, Sixers and 6. The series might look like how that one game at the Garden looked, where it was like 79-70 or something. It might not be that low scoring, but it's certainly going to be. There's going to be very few games that go into the 110s, I think. So we'll see how it goes. I always feel with the Sixers just from post trauma, but I feel more confident with this coach than I do with any other coach.
Absolutely. And I hear you. There's plenty of evidence and reason for the past trauma there. But I do think as a whole, like Philadelphia fans, like have to let it go a little bit. That you got to look at each season, each team as a different identity. And this year specifically, it's like this is a very unrecognizable team compared to years past. Yes, there's Joel Embiid. Yes, there's Tobias Harris. But when you look beyond that, like this is the first chance that Tyrese Maxey is going to get to be this type of number 2 guy. We have not had a Kyle Lowry here. We have not had a Kelly Oubre here. We have not had Nico Batum. And Nick Nurse, once again, is the dude who's got the job done before, that he won a championship with his first year with the Raptors, has won at every level he's been. So I hear you. I feel you. But I do think I would appreciate a little more objective mind from the city as a whole, I think.
All right, people are just upset that PJ Tucker isn't on this playoff team this year. That's what people are upset about. Let's look at the first round predictions. We're pre-recording this episode on Friday, so we don't know every outcome, every matchup for the first round, but we're going to give our takes for what the playoff, for what they will be. We're going to start with Celtics at the first seed in the East against the 8th seed, which is either going to be the Bulls or the Heat. Who do you have coming out on top, Bulls or Heat, and how many games will the Celtics win?
Yeah, I think regardless of who wins this playing game, that the Celtics are going to take care of business pretty easily. I do lean towards the Bulls getting the win. I do think the Jimmy Butler injury is notable. I absolutely could see a hot Tyler Hero night, just a scrappy victory by Miami. So I do think this game's a bit of a toss-up. But I do think this Bulls team they're just better than they should be, better than they've played all year. And Kobe White, the resurgence is the real deal. So I kind of expect that to carry in and for them to find a way to get the win in the play-in victory. But the bottom line is you're walking into what I probably think is going to be a sweep by this Boston team. As much as like they still have some concerns in the long run, neither one of these teams are teams, and specifically the Heat without Jimmy Butler, are teams that can push them to any sort of limit. So I think the Celtics clean up. I'll be a generous Celtics in 5, but I think that the sweep is very much on the table.
Yeah, definitely. Boston might be busting out the brooms a little bit early here. We'll skip over the Knicks and Sixers. We both had Sixers and 6. The 3-seeded Bucks against the 6-seeded Pacers. No Giannis Antetokounmpo for Milwaukee. Does that open the door to an Indiana upset?
I think the door was already open even with a healthy Giannis, to be perfectly honest. I do think this is Pacers in 7. I think this is going to be a fun series, a hard-nosed series. And I'm honestly very disappointed by the Giannis injury. Number 1, obviously, because you want to see the best players on the biggest stage. And number 2, because it just handed Doc Rivers another excuse on a silver platter that I truly think this team has been leaking oil for the past couple weeks, couple months even. They are 17-19 with Doc Rivers as the head coach, which is just straight up difficult to do with the amount of talent on that roster. And there's bad blood between these teams already. That dating back to the in-season tournament, there was a situation earlier this year where Giannis scored a career high and was chasing people in the hallways, trying to bring back that ball and track that down. So I think it's going to be a fun series. It's going to be very scrappy as well. And I think ultimately that the Pacers, with Giannis not being himself, that they find a way to get the job done.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Maybe Doc Rivers will also blame the travel service as well. So we'll see how that one shapes out. 4-seeded Cavs against the 5-seeded Magic. If you asked me earlier this year that the Magic were going to be the 5 seed, I would have called you crazy. But Magic put out some magic this year, and they're taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 4-5 series. Who is coming out on top in the final East series?
Yeah, this is a bit of a toss-up for me. I've flip-flopped my opinion. I think I've ultimately landed on the Orlando Magic. They're young, they're scrappy, they're hungry. I honestly have issues with both these teams from just an overall team construction. I think they're both flawed in their own individual ways. I just don't think there's enough perimeter creation on this Magic team or shooting as a whole. But I also don't love that the way that the Cavs have kind of coming up short in the biggest moments. And I'm not an Evan Mobley guy. I think that he's not a guy whose game has translated the way a lot of people have hoped. And I get the numbers are there. You can absolutely make an argument against me. But I just think that they're a little bit short on the talent that needs to get the job done, and it's going to take Donovan Mitchell having absolutely stellar games for them to get enough wins. And the Magic have a little more diverse ways they can get it done. So I'll roll with the Magic in 7. I think this is going to be another deep series, a bit of a toss-up, but I could see this one going either way as well.
I would like to see the Magic go deep so I can just keep hearing their song on TikTok because it's a banger. It's number 2 behind the everyone clap your hands, whatever. Here come the Sixers. But let's move over to the West. The 1-seeded Thunder, who also, if you told me that the Thunder would be the 1 seed at the start of the year, I would have also called you crazy, but here we are. And then the 8th seed is either going to be the Kings or the Pelicans. The Pels will be without Zion, which was really hurt to see a little bit because Zion finally had a fully healthy season and then end of the play-in unable to finish it out with his injury. The game's in New Orleans. Kings, Pels, who do you have as the 8th seed? And do they have the possibility of taking down the Thunder?
I think the Kings get the job done in the play-in tonight at the time of obviously us recording beforehand, but I think the Zion loss is going to be too much. That is the centerpiece, and very disappointed for Zion on an individual standpoint that he truly was in the midst of the best game of his career. And frankly, I think if he did not get hurt when he did, that the Pelicans very likely win that game against the Lakers. So I think ultimately the Kings do get the job done tonight, but the bottom line is this Thunder team is too good for either one. I love this Thunder team. They're a blast to watch. They're fun to root for. And I'm very happy that they avoided the Lakers matchup because that was one that did scare me from a matchup standpoint with Chet Holmgren not being able to hold up well against Anthony Davis. But I think either the Pelicans or Kings, which they're going to look just fine against, I think it's Thunder in 5 in this first round.
Another question about the Thunder. A lot of people saying that they're the worst 1 seed ever in a long time. I disagree. Obviously, I see you disagree. And what are your thoughts on those interesting takes?
Yeah, they're obviously a young team, but they're the real deal. There's a ton of talent on this team. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a very legitimate MVP case. I would love to see him win it. I think Jokic will overall get the award, but Shai right in the mix, and a guy that on both sides of the floor does it. Chet Holmgren, I get that he's young, but he's the real deal. I just love the way this roster is constructed. Jalen Williams is another guy that will be an all-star in the short term, not the long term. There's a ton of talent on this team. And if you want to end with me throwing a little bit of shade here, that I would give that worst 1 seed in the Western Conference ever to the Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell Jazz teams that kind of held down that floor. It would be my pick there.
What an era of the NBA. The 2-7 series is the Denver Nuggets against the Los Angeles Lakers. Is LeBron going to pull out some wizardy stuff against Denver, or will Denver stand up business as they usually do?
Yeah, I think Denver keeps cruising here. That I think they're legit again. They're not quite as good as they were last year. Obviously, missing Bruce Brown and a couple other pieces around the edges that did move on. But there's guys that are stepping up. Peyton Watson looks really good. They have that next generation of guys that are filling their roles and finding their stride at the right time. I think the Nuggets get the job done in 6 games. I'll give the Lakers respectfully winning 2. And again, if the bracket shook out differently, that the Lakers had a chance at defeating this Thunder team, but I don't think they have quite enough to take down the Nuggets.
The 3-6 series, the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Phoenix Suns. The Suns team, I just can't buy any of their stock. Too many players that I just don't have respect for. And so who do you have coming out on top in the 3-6 series out in the West?
Yeah, this is going to be probably the one that piques my interest the most from a matchup standpoint when you look at how these teams are constructed. That specifically the Timberwolves, their defense is built to force opponents into mid-range jumpers. They take away the 3-point and they take away the rim protection with Rudy Gobert there. Then you look at this Suns team who lead the league in mid-range attempts per game. So there's very much going to be an interesting give and take with how that plays itself out. I think I ultimately land on the Timberwolves getting the job done in 7 games, but this is a series that I think is going to go deep. I think we're in for a lot of good first-round matchups, and this, I think, fits that bill. I think the Anthony Edwards and Devin Booker matchup is going to be awesome. Kevin Durant, obviously, is still doing it at a high level. He's had a better year than he's gotten credit for. So I think it's going to be a fight, but I do think that the Timberwolves squeak by.
The 4-5 series in the West, some are saying this is the best series of the first round. The 4 seed Clippers with your boy James Harden, and the 5 seed Dallas Mavericks. This one could be a fun one. It has some good potential. Who do you have winning it?
Yeah, I was buying into what the Clippers were selling earlier on in the year, but the Kawhi Leonard injury news does not look good, and I frankly just think that team goes as he goes. So I'm rolling with the Mavericks in 6 games. I am a believer in the way that Dallas is playing. Kyrie and Luka have absolutely figured out how to play off each other. Adding guys like Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington has opened up the offense entirely. And there's other guys that buy in. The Dante Exum resurgence is real. So I believe in this Mavericks team to make a little bit of a run in this playoffs, and I think they clean up this Clippers team in 6.
So you have advancing the Celtics, the Sixers, the Pacers, the Magic, the Thunder, the Nugs, the Timberwolves, and the Mavericks. Those are your first round winners. I pretty much agree with you. So good job from both of us there. We made it through the Sixers, and that means we have our first ad read of the show, and we have to thank SeatGeek, of course, who has been with us throughout the entire show. SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot indicating whether purchasing that ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. Get your tickets for the Sixers playoffs by using code Philly Sports Report, and you will save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. I was looking at tickets the other day. They're not crazy expensive just yet, and you can save some money on them as well. Again, that's code Philly Sports Report, PHILLYSPORTSREPORT, and you will save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Click on the link in the description or in the bio to save. Thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring. Yeah, tickets aren't too bad just yet. I was looking at there's a weekend game in there that looked intriguing. So yeah, Philly's gonna shell out anyway, but they're gonna get their tickets on SeatGeek and save some money as well. Let's look at the Eagles now, who had a productive week, and also some interesting news came out about a NFL legend. We'll get to that, but we're going to start positive. Devontae Smith. Eagles picked up Smitty's 5th-year option on his rookie contract and agreed to a 3-year contract extension through the 2028 season. Smith this season will play on in 2025. He will play on the 5th-year option, and his 3-year extension starts in 2026 and will end in 28. And is worth $75 million, including $51 million guaranteed. Just a great move by Howie Roseman once again to lock up Devontae Smith, and they've locked up a lot of young talent. Has it cost at the cost of Hassan Reddick? Maybe, but is it worth it?
I believe so. And this is another theme of Howie Roseman kind of setting the market of things, that making sure you're locking up Devontae Smith as there's still these rumblings of, the Jamar Chases, the CeeDee Lambs, the Justin Jeffersons seeking their big paycheck. So I'm glad that we got our guy taken care of. I love having Devontae on this team. He's a guy that I still think goes underrated in the national conversations for how good that he truly is. And that's a reason why they were able to get this done. He's been happy here. He is a guy that is too often considered the Robin to A.J. Brown's Batman, when I think there's many teams that who'd be the clear-cut number one on. So happy that he's around for the long term. Glad that it got done when it did and that there is no distractions with it. And I'm just very grateful that he is the number 2 to this team.
Yeah, that's for sure. And they've locked up Landon Dickerson, Jake Elliott, Devontae Smith, and a few others. It might have cost at the cost of Hassan Reddick, who might have been looking for too much money, and the Eagles had this plan the whole way. They, of course, replaced him with Bryce Huff, of course, added Saquon Barkley. Are you fine with all these re-signings and kind of costing Hassan Reddick?
I'm disappointed because I liked having Hassan here, and I think obviously he's one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL still and will be for the foreseeable future. The Bryce Huff signing is interesting. He was not a guy remotely on my radar going into the offseason, and he's a guy that seems like more of a statistically driven or a belief on what he will be rather than what he currently is. But I can't doubt what Howie Roseman has been doing of late, and especially the cap implications that come with it. So I don't love it overall, but I am trusting the mindset and the belief behind it, and we'll ultimately see how it plays out.
And I'm interested to see how this next story plays out with Bill Belichick, as the Eagles were named a potential option for Bill in 2025. If the Eagles were going to do it, why wouldn't they have done it in 2024, you may ask? The ESPN.com article says the Eagles' potential interest in Belichick as a replacement for Nick Sirianni. The concern reportedly was that post-Belichick, the Eagles would have to start over again after he left. It's just so weird. It's so out of nowhere.
Yeah, it is bizarre, and I hate every bit of it. You can't deny what Bill Belichick has done, the success that he has had, but I just feel like there is no world where this works in the Eagles organization. That Belichick is very much a my way or the highway type of guy, and we saw a little bit during the Chip Kelly era. Obviously, Belichick has way more pedigree and way more reason why you should have that belief, but the way that a guy wanting total control. It just doesn't work here. That there needs to be the Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie kind of having their hands in the pot a little bit. You can feel however you feel about that, but that's the reality of the situation, that they're going to be more comfortable with a Nick Sirianni type coach who is open to at least some opinions or having some sort of involvement with that. And Sirianni, if I'm him, I'm pretty frustrated by this. The fact this is even coming out in general, it feels a little bit like, like I think my fiance is the one, but I just need to go chat it up with these girls a little bit to make sure that's the case. Like that would not sit well whatsoever. And I kind of think that's the situation on the football field here. So I'm not a Belichick guy. Again, you can't deny the success that he's had, but I do think that now is not the time to give him the opportunity to rebuild, that he's had his success. And I think like the best situation for him would be to go in, take a team for maybe a handful of years. And I just don't think the Eagles are the organization that it fits.
Yeah, that's for sure. I would not be happy if Bill Belichick came to Philadelphia. Just on personal standpoint, it could maybe have a difference, but it's just, I don't know if it would work. Another thing that was interesting involving the Patriots was A.J. Brown. He apparently followed a bunch of Patriots players, changed his profile picture to Tom Brady. He came out with something yesterday just saying that he's his favorite player, Tom Brady, and it has since been deleted, that tweet. I was looking for it, couldn't find it. I think it's just a certain football account that we all know and love trying to get some clicks once again, and it doesn't really mean anything. And is A.J. Brown really going to go anywhere?
Yeah, the A.J. Brown stuff is more annoying from the media side of things than I think it is from him specifically. And I think he's made that pretty clear that it's been frustrating, this kind of battle. I hate that it does feel a little bit of the Philly media driving star players out is coming true in this situation. I don't think he loves all the situations and all the news that just happens to surround him. But the bottom line is he is that good of a football player that you do put up with it, is the more that I feel. That even if he does have a little bit of the prima donna or a little bit of the whininess or however you want to word it, I think his true intentions are better than people give him credit. He brings it every time he's on the football field. And by the way, a lot of his complaints, they were true last year, that he should have got them all more than he did, and that they were at their best when he was breaking those 100-yard streaks and all the other things that he did do. So I'm happy that AJ remains with this team. I hope this doesn't continue to be an issue throughout the season and as it gets closer, but it is frustrating how this is the AJ Brown latest news has basically become a part of the news cycle at this point.
Yeah, it's annoying, but we're just going to try and look over it because, as you said, he is just so good. Just move on from it. And thank you, ML Football, once again, for trying to get clicks. Anyway, the draft is less than 2 weeks away somehow. I feel like it's creeped up on us. Who are you looking for in this draft? Eagles in the 20s with their pick. Who are you looking out for, and what do you think the Eagles may do?
Yeah, I haven't dug too deep in the weeds for it. This hasn't been a year where I've dove in, have my guys that I've red circled and highlighted. I do like Cooper DeJean quite a bit, and I would like to kind of beef up the secondary. I think that would be an interesting move there. I also am a believer in kind of the Eagles mindset of when in doubt, build through the trenches and take a guy like that. So I wouldn't mind that being the mindset either. Overall, this is kind of a draft that this to me is a pick for depth here, that there isn't the clear-cut hole that you need to address on this team. The secondary, you can point to a couple areas in the defense that still could use some needs. But the bottom line is I'm going to take for talent, take the best player available, and just let those guys figure themselves out. I think this team is fairly complete as is. So for me, I'm just beefing up and adding depth to everything.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do in a week or so. Couple weeks now, which is crazy. It's really crept up on us. But something that you don't want to creep by you is the best gear out there, and that is FOCO. Real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description or the bio to save 10% off on any order. You can get those overalls. You can get those bobbleheads. They got a lot of great stuff over there. And sure, they'll be releasing more throughout the Sixers playoff run. So maybe you can go get some overalls and wear those for the playoff show.
Yeah, why not? It worked for the Phillies, I guess, kind of. So I do like the vibes of the overalls. So maybe I have to look into that.
Yeah, and you'll make sure to click on the link on Philly Sports. Maybe save some money. But we're coming to the home stretch here. And what better team to round it out than the Philadelphia Phillies, who are well into their season now. It's no longer early. And that starting rotation has been utterly dominant. They have the lowest starting pitching ERA in the National League at 2.54. Ranger Suarez, complete game shutout the other night. He has been unbelievable. Zach Wheeler's looked really good. Aaron Nola's looked pretty good. Spencer Turnbull has opened a lot of eyes, and Christopher Sanchez on Wednesday night looked really good as well. This rotation is dominant, Sean.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, like, I know the quotes running around about how this team's going to slug, and this team's very much been built around their bats, but they're getting the job done with the starting pitching right now, and every guy has stepped up to the challenge. I will say that Ranger Suarez, personally, probably my favorite player on the team, and I love seeing, like, just the way that he carries himself, the carelessness, the carefreeness that he is able to field his position, and I truly believe that as great as guys like Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola are, like, when we get to the playoffs, it should be pitching around Ranger Suarez, that he's had success in the postseason. He is a guy that, like, I know it hasn't been perfect from a team-wide concept to this point, but you're absolutely right that pitching has kind of become this team's identity. And it's really impressive that, like, there is not a weak spot in this rotation right now. And I think they're probably the only team in the MLB that you can truly say that about.
Yeah, until a couple of weeks for Taijuan Walker. He's got one more rehab start, and then he's rejoining the team. So we'll see how that goes. It sounds like he's going to replace Spencer Turnbull's spot. He gets to start on Friday night. Obviously, we don't know how that is going to go because we're pre-recording this, so hopefully it went well. But good for the Phils. And you mentioned the slug. They're starting to slug. The bats are alive a little bit. Schwarber hit 2 the other night. Trey Turner got another one. Bryce Harper's gotten a few. The weather's starting to get warmer, and so are the bats, and that's kind of how this team functions.
Yeah, and that's how they have to win. That as much as we can kind of sugarcoat things, and I've seen all the complaints about guys like Johan Rojas and all these other things. The bottom line is the real deal hitters have to be real deal hitters. That they're the Bryce Harpers of the world, the Trey Turners of the world. These guys have to find a way to put the ball at the ballpark, and we are starting to see that happen. I will say I still have some legitimate concerns about Nick Castellanos, and that's been like the number one guy that has been my frustration point for this Phillies team so far to start. But overall, I'm not as panicked as I think a lot of people are. And I mean, we've seen this team start slow in several years in a row now. I don't think they're nearly at that type of valley, or at least my level of concern is not nearly to that point for this specific season. But I do think the bats are waking up, and it's only going to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, you mentioned Nick Castellanos. It's been a little bit of a struggle, and something else that we thought was going to be a struggle, but kind of has turned it around a little bit, is Johan Rojas, who apparently did some work in the cage with Turner, and he's been kind of red hot for a little bit. Rojas, who started off horrible, and I was saying to start the season, have him down low. We saw Jack Fritz a few weeks ago saying to send him down. He's starting to turn it around a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a Johan Rojas guy that I do ride or die with him a little bit. I do think that his defensive ability is worth taking some of the offensive shortcomings, and when it does fully click, the potential is unreal for that kid. And we're starting to see that there are genuine, tangible signs of growth in his plate approach, in his ability to just make contact, put the bat on the ball. So I do think Rojas is worth going through the highs and lows with at this point in time. And another guy, Brandon Marsh, has been absolutely terrific this year, that it's unbelievable how well he's playing. So outfield has sort of been looked at as a bit of a weak spot, I think, for this team. It has not looked like that so far to start this year. So both Marsh and Rojas I've been really impressed with. And I think Rojas, like, we're at a start of something that could be a really long-term potential career for him.
It could be, especially with that defense. If he can play a full year out there, he's breaking every single defensive matrix. Oh my goodness, defensive statistic matrix, whatever you want to call it. And he's electric out there, and it's gonna be fun. Nick Castellanos not so electric. Hopefully that'll change coming soon. We're keeping the show positive, though. We're keeping this a positive show. Lots of good things going on in Philadelphia sports. A lot of good things you're doing too. Where can people find you on socials, Sean?
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. And you can follow me at Sean_Barnard1 on Twitter. You can also check out Pick Swap Media, Sixers Digest on YouTube there. And then Fox Sports The Gambler. You can always catch me on their airwaves pretty consistently throughout the week. We'll be on 11 to 1 every Saturday, and between 3 and 6, somewhere in that period between Monday through Friday. So check me out on all those avenues.
Yeah, so after you're done watching the Philly Sports Hour from 11 to 12 on Saturdays, make sure you tune into The Gambler and listen to Sean for the back hour of his show. Sean, thank you very much for coming on. Sixers in 6. It's going to be a fun series. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. If you can't make the live streams on Saturday mornings, it's always up on YouTube. I think it saves on Twitter, and then, of course, over on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. So go check it out over there. Another thing, promoting the Philly sports game at the bank once again. Phil's Cardinals, June 1st, Saturday at 7:15. Pregame meetup, rally towel, sit up with the Fandemic crew, $50 a ticket. Venmo, Jennifer G71 before it's too late. It's going to be a great time, so make sure everyone, if you're interested, make sure to hop on the opportunity. Make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us everywhere. Links in the description. Thank you to SeatGeek and Foco. Sixers and 6. We'll be back with you next week. Thank you for watching and listening to the Philly Sports.
Swing and a drive, left field. It's deep. It's gone. And it is gone. Yes. It is Bedlam at the bank. Look at the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way back to me. It is safe and slammed up. And the doctor made a sensational play. Through in front, the foot, did he score? Mr. Moose Cutter! Blasted, fires, blasted, goal! 35 to 10. He steps up his head and goes forward. And he fumbles the football and be able